Okay, let's do a little segment on primers and guide coats, because they're really the key. The primer and the guide coat are really the key to getting a perfect paint finish with the least possible effort, and with the fewest possible coats as well. Paint is very good at giving a beautiful surface, but there's very little build. Paint doesn't create a very thick film. Paint is a fairly thin film. So to create, if you're going over a surface that's less than perfect with paint, it takes quite a few coats of paint and sanding in between the coats to get a perfect finish. Whereas you can achieve a perfect finish with 1 or maybe 2 coats of primer and then 1 or 2 coats of paint over the top. So ideally, 1 coat of primer and sanding, and then 1 coat of paint, and you might come out with a flawless finish. However, primer is easy to apply, and if you want to put on a 2nd coat of primer, that's fine too. And same with the paint, you can put on a 2nd coat of paint. But you will end up with a perfect finish then. The concept of a primer is, first, it adheres well to the surface that you're coating, wood or fiberglass. And second, it's very high build and sands easily. That's the advantage of primer over clear epoxy coating. The clear epoxy can achieve the same effect, but you'll end up working a lot harder. The clear epoxy won't go on as smoothly as a primer, so you'll have a lot of ridges and bumps that you'll have to sand out. And the clear epoxy is much, much tougher to sand. If there's any advantage to clear epoxy, using it instead of a primer, it might be slightly tougher than the primers, but I don't think that's even a real consideration. It's not an important consideration at all. So primers, they save work and make for perfect finishes. Now you have 2 choices in primers basically. 1-part primers or multiple part primers. Don't ever use a multiple part paint, catalyzed polyurethane type paint or catalyzed epoxy type paint over a single part primer. The catalyzed paints use really aggressive solvents, and in their one of the ingredients is an aggressive solvent in the catalyzed paints, and that'll probably make any single part paint bubble up and blister underneath the 3-part or 2-part paint. So decide on which system you're going to use, and then make sure you don't top coat a single part system with a multiple part system. You can go the other way though. If you have a multiple part primer, that will be impervious to any single part top coat. So a multiple part primer can be top coated with a single part, like a spray can, rattle can, or whatever. But don't go the other way. Don't have single part paints or varnishes on your surface and then put a multiple part over the top, because you'll get blistering almost certainly. Okay, so if you're going with the simpler approach, those are the simpler and less expensive both. Those are the single part primers. And there are a number of them on the market, and they come either in spray cans or in brush-on cans. I don't think you'll find there's much difference between these. This is a Rust-Oleum. It's called 123 primer for all surfaces. This was a very fast drying primer, probably slightly less build than the Rust-Oleum. A Zinalite, it was just light gray primer. So either one of these, and if you have some other brand on the shelf in your store, that's probably going to do about the same quality work as these. They'll build fairly quickly. They're very fast drying. You can spray and just pause and then spray again, and you can spray several, fairly good coats, letting it dry a few minutes in between. And then you'll have enough surface coverage that you can sand without sanding through your primer. This would be the brush-on version here of the Rust-Oleum brand. Oh, actually, this is a different brand. Sorry, this is called Zinsser brand, but it's probably pretty comparable to this. Oh, these are both for Zinsser. I thought they were Rust-Oleum. Okay, well I expect Rust-Oleum has one too. So I may have been misleading you. I need to read the labels more carefully. You can probably read it better than I can. Zinsser, bullseye 1, 2, 3 for all surfaces. Okay, but as I say, all those single part primers are probably going to be fairly compatible, fairly comparable with each other, and compatible with a single part top surface. Okay, now if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated, a little more professional, then you can go to a multiple part primer, and this is going to be an especially good one. Interlux makes really fine, high quality paints for full-size boats, and they work great on models as well. This is the 404 base here. You can see it right here. This is the 404 system, and it's just called the epoxy prime coat. Now, when you use this, you've got to mix it with 3-to-1 with the prime coat primer reactor, and this reactor is, I don't know if you can read that, 414. So these we get mixed, 3 parts of the larger can, the 404, and 1 part of the smaller can, 414. Now that'll give you too thick a mixture, so you're going to, if you're spraying it, you're going to thin it with the 2316N, and that's critical. You can't use it without mixing it with the thinner, and you'll be mixing about 25% of thinner into the combined mixture that you get with the 404 and the 414. Okay, if you're going to brush it on, they're calling for a different thinner. So this gets a little bit complicated, as you can see. For brushing, it's you're not going to be able to see this on the camera, and I'm not sure I can read it. Get some light on it. 233N. Okay, I'm going to pause and make sure I've got that right. Hold on 1 second. Okay. A nifty little tool here for these close-up jobs. Okay, that is, yes, I was right. 2333N is in November. That's, see how teensy that print is. Yeah, no way you can read that. Okay, 2333N, that's for brushing as opposed to spraying, and 2316N for spraying. Spraying, if you have the setup for spraying, spraying is going to be somewhat superior, although and probably a little less work because you get a smoother finish to before you start sanding. But brushing should, in the end, provide, you know, a very, very fine finish as well. So don't be if you don't have spraying equipment, you probably don't want to invest in it. Although if you have a compressor, the spray guns from Harbor Freight are, boy, when they're on sale, they're less than $20, I think. So adding spraying equipment to your shop may not be as expensive as you think it would be. So a few things there. Okay, now these have been sprayed. This is a rudder piece. I'm going to tip down here so you can see what we're doing here and how simple this setup is. This is just a little Tupperware tray, dish basin, I guess, pan. And so this is a rudder part for a Marblehead class sloop, and it's been sprayed with the epoxy primer, the Intercoat epoxy prime coat, Interlux epoxy prime coat, and so we had a nice spraying finish. And then after spraying, we did the dusting, very light dusting with a fast drying black, this was a Zinolite, which dries in about 10 minutes. And that is a neat step to add. It's very quick, just takes a few seconds to dust it with a very fast drying spray. And those sprays are just, you know, $3 or $4. Those cans are just $3 or $4, very cheap. And all of that's going to be sanded off. We've already finished this side, sanding it down, but I want to show you what happens when you sand it, because this is the guide coat. This light dusting is the guide coat, and what it does is it will tell us when we've sanded down to the primer everywhere evenly and keep us from having to guess. Okay, so now you'll see this. We're sanding with a wet dry sandpaper, and that's a 320 grit here, which is really pretty ideal for this job. And now we've sanded just lightly. You can see how there, you can see some patterns emerging. In through here there's some low spots and some high spots. The high spots have been sanded off and the low spots are still remaining, so that'll take a little more sanding. In here looks like we're pretty even. Now you have to do this with a sanding block. These rubberized blocks are nice. They're quite a stiff rubber. You could use a piece of wood, and that would, with sandpaper glued to it with contact cement, that would work. But these blocks are very nice and work well. If you use just a piece of sandpaper, your fingers will push it down into any dips, and so your whole surface may not be totally smooth. Whereas with a rigid block, you can't get into the dips without sanding the whole surface smooth. Okay, so a little bit more sanding, and then you'll see here that pattern has gone away in there. Let's wash it off there. So that area is pretty good. Maybe a little bit, there are a few specks right in there that we should be able to get out. Okay, this was a fairly heavy coat of prime coat. The multiple part primers tend to build more thickness than the single part primers. And so we have quite a bit to work with here, and we should be able to get down to a perfect finish everywhere. Okay, you can see when you're sanding on big flat surfaces, you're going to have to sand a lot more. When you're sanding on a curved surface or a sharp edge, be very delicate, because you have a lot of point pressure and you'll sand through very easily. Okay, a little teensy speck right here. I don't know if these little specks are going to show up very well on the camera, but they are telling you, oh, there's a little dip there. Okay, you can see how easily this sands down. And this piece, if I'd done it with epoxy, would have been quite a lot of work to sand it down, and I might have had to do a second coat even, because the epoxy won't build as evenly or as thickly as thick a coating. Okay, and that's going to look pretty good there at the bottom. Okay, now this is where you can see I thought I had that bottom part done, and if I didn't have a guide coat, I'd probably I might have stopped right there. But the guide coat's telling me that right down here there's a little bit of the black left, and I haven't got that smooth. It's very hard to tell. You can tell almost 1/1000th of an inch variation with your finger, and I can't hardly feel. That feels smooth, but it's not smooth because the guide coat isn't gone. So just a teensy bit more there. A little bit more there. Oh, one other thing of this, the multiple part primers, is that although they do have a thinner that's going to evaporate out, they are also setting themselves off like epoxy. And so you can actually, if you have a space where there's a slightly bigger dip or void, you can actually use it almost like a putty and fill that area. Not super thick, but you can definitely fill any pinholes or anything. You can go back and just fill them. You're now very delicate on the back edge, because that will sand through very easily. Okay, and then we'll finish up, and you can see how quick this goes. So I've saved a lot of work by using a really high quality primer. And over this multiple part primer I can use either a rattle can, but I will get a better finish if I use a spraying system with a multiple part, like a 2-part catalyzed polyurethane. That'll give a super finish. All Grip is one of those products. There are a number of different products that are 2-part catalyzed polyurethanes. And they give superb finishes and high gloss and very, incredible durability. Okay, I think that's all, and then I'll finish up. You can see the top of the keel is not finished. The top of the rudder is not done yet. I haven't sanded there at all. A lot of the guide coat is left. And then after I finish that, I'll move on to the Marblehead keel. And that's, I got the same prime coat on it and the same guide coat. Okay, hope that's helpful. That's really all you need to know to get a superlative finish on top of wood or on top of an epoxy surface. Just remember, don't use a multiple part catalyzed finish on top of any single part finish like varnish or spray can, because it'll bubble right up and you'll have to take it all off down to the bare surface again. Okay, hope that's helpful. Good luck, and it's a pleasure getting to present these things to you and help you get a perfect finish on your T37 or your T50 or whichever boat you're building. Okay, have fun, happy sailing, bye.